In today's lesson, we're going to use the zero product property to solve equations. So let's first talk about what the zero product property is. The zero product property is a rule that says if two things are being multiplied together, that's the product. So in this case, we're going to call them A times B. If these two multiplied together equal 0, zero product property, right? A product that equals 0. If A times B is 0, what do we know about these two variables? Well, we know that either A could be 0 or B could be 0, or they both could be 0. This is an important property to use when you are solving equations, because then if you could factor that equation, that is factoring writing something as a product, then we can solve the equation. So let's look at a few of those equations. Let's solve this equation. Now I have two variables involved here. But because they are being multiplied together on the left side and it equals 0 on the right side, I can use the zero product property. The solution to this equation is simply just saying that, well, x could be 0 or y could be 0. Here's a slightly different equation. Let's check to see if we can use the zero product property to solve this. The first thing I look for is if I have an equation that equals 0. Yes, I do. The second thing I need is that the other side of the equation to be written as a product, that is, something that's factored. Right here I have x times this entire quantity y minus 2. This is written as a product. So let's use the property. The property says that if two things multiplied together equal 0, either one of them could be 0. So my solution could be that x is 0 or y minus 2 equals 0. I'm not done here because I don't have solutions for just x and y. I know that x could be 0 and this is fine. But if y minus 2 is 0, what should y really be? The solution here would be that y equals 2. These are my two solutions to this equation. Why isn't it that y could be 0? Because if I plug 0 in for y right here, I would get 0 minus 2, which is negative 2. I want 0 in this entire quantity right here. So for that to happen, y must be 2. Can this equation be solved with the zero product property? Let's check. Is one side of the equation 0? Yes. Is the other side of the equation written as a product? Yes, it is. I have w times w plus 3. So then using the property, w could be 0 or w plus 3 could be 0. This one is fine as a solution, but this one I need to do a little bit of solving. In this case, I would need to subtract 3 from both sides, so w could be negative 3. These are my two solutions. Can this equation be solved using the zero product property? The right side is 0. The left side is a product. It's the product of x minus 7 times x plus 2. So yes, I can use the zero product property to solve. Zero product property tells me that I can set each factor equal to 0. Then I just need to solve these two equations to get my solutions. In this case, I would add 7 to both sides and get that x could be 7. In this case, I'd have to subtract 2 from both sides, so I would get x equals negative 2. The solutions to this equation right here are that x could be 7 or negative 2. Can I solve this equation using the zero product property? I have the right side equaling 0, but the left side right now is not a product. So I need to factor it to write it as a product. That is what we are doing when we are factoring. We are taking a polynomial and writing it as a product. So to factor this, I would first look for the common factor. They're both divisible by 4, and they both have a y. I'm going to factor that out in front, and I'm left with y minus 2 on the inside. I now have a product on this side that equals 0. So zero product property tells me I can set each individual factor equal to 0 to find my solutions. Here I would divide by 4, but by dividing by 4 I still get 0 as an answer. Here I need to add 2 to both sides, so y equals positive 2. My solutions to this equation then, y could be 0 or 2. Solve. In order to solve this equation, in this lesson I want to use the zero product property, but I have two big problems. I don't have a product, and I don't have an equation that equals 0. So the first thing I'm going to need to do is to rewrite this so that one side of this equation is 0. I will always tell you, whatever you do, make sure that your squared term remains positive. I could subtract s squared from both sides of this equation right now, but that would make my squared term negative. I don't really want to do that. So instead, I'm going to subtract 18s from both sides, and I will get s squared minus 18s equals negative 81. Then I need to add 81 to both sides. I've now collected all of my terms on one side of the equation. So now I have the first part of the zero product property. I have something that equals 0, but this over here is not a product. So I need to factor it. That is the key. That's why we're learning how to factor, so we can learn how to solve these types of equations. I have a coefficient of 1 problem here. I don't necessarily need the factor box, though you could use it if you wanted to. I'm really just looking for two numbers that multiply to be 81 and add to be negative 18. Those two numbers are negative 9 and negative 9. Put the s in the beginning. Now I have an equation that I can use the zero product property for. Off to the side I can say, well, this factor could be 0, or this factor could be 0. And now because really they're the same factor, I get the same solution for both. That s should be 9. So my final answer for this equation, way up here, this original one here, s equals 9. Why is there only one answer to this problem when there were two answers to all of them before? Because this problem has identical factors when we split them up. Solve. Again, we want to use zero product property. Our first step is going to be getting one side of this equation equal to 0. I'm going to pick the lowest powers of x and move those. So I'm subtracting 9x from both sides. Now, I have one side equal to 0. Now I need to factor. Common factor here is x. I need to take that out first. What property can I use to factor what's left here? That's right, the dose rule. 2x, 2x, 3, 3, plus or minus, all equals 0. Now this problem with the zero product property has 3 quantities being multiplied. That's fine. The zero product property doesn't necessarily only need to have 2 things. It could be 3, 4, 5. As long as it's written as a product, each one of these can be set equal to 0. So this means that x could be 0, 2x plus 3 could be 0, or 2x minus 3 could be 0. I am splitting this equation up into 3 different equations. So this one's fine. This one's solved for x. I need to solve this one for x by subtracting 3 from both sides and then dividing by 2. So this equation had 2 steps in order to solve it. Same thing with this one. I need to add 3 to both sides and then divide by 2. So I have 3 solutions to this equation. X could be 0. X could be negative 3/2. Or if you grab a calculator to simplify that, 1 1/2. And then this one right here, positive 3/2, which is again 1 1/2. I am absolutely fine if you want to leave your fractions as improper fractions like this answer. That's perfectly fine. If you are a person who likes rules or steps to solve equations, here would be your steps to solve these problems using the zero product property, or ZPP, as I wrote up there. Your first step is to collect everything onto one side of the equation. Make one side equal to 0. It doesn't matter if it's the left or right side. All of your terms need to be on one side together. Whatever you have, you need to then factor it completely. After factoring it completely, each factor gets set to 0, and you solve those simple equations.